North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. Welcome to the broadcast. Good to have you here. This is a very big day weather-wise in the United States of America. Hurricane Ian has hit the Florida coast, and it is quite a storm. It is on the brink of being a Category 5 storm. There have only been a handful of Category 5 storms that have ever hit the United States of America. And this, while it won't make Category 5 going across Florida, it is as close as you need it to be for all the tough things that people say about hurricanes. They are amazingly mighty storms, and one is currently lashing Florida. Here's the latest from USA Today. Floodwaters are racing down streets and enveloping lawns along the southwest coast as heavy rains and high winds from historic Hurricane Ian roared closer to landfall, which was expected within hours. The eye wall of the storm is moving onto Sanibel and Captiva Islands, according to the National Hurricane Center. Ian had grown to near Category 5 strength, blasting 155-mile-per-hour winds, prompting mandatory evacuation orders for 2.5 million Floridians. Although some who have not yet fled, it is too late. They are going to have to ride out the storm in place. A wind gust of 112 miles per hour was measured at the Naples Grand Beach Resort at 12:34 this afternoon. It's going to have a major impact in terms of wind, in terms of rain, in terms of flooding. This, according to Governor Ron DeSantis in a briefing on Wednesday. It's going to be a very nasty days. Or 2 days. More than 600,000 homes and businesses across Florida are already dark. This, according to the tracking website Power Outage US. Power outages should be expected statewide, according to Florida Power and Light. AccuWeather projected landfall will occur this afternoon. It has already happened. And it would be somewhat south of Venice and north of Fort Myers. As of 2 p.m., the storm center was located 25 miles west-northwest of Fort Myers. Ian will slam much of the state with life-threatening storm surges, catastrophic winds, and flooding, according to the National Hurricane Center. Let's see what the possibilities are of being able to join USA Today's coverage. Let's see here. This is showing a. I'm gonna give you a look at this so you can see it. This is what USA Today is putting out. And the thing about it is that it's quite an amazing shot. Let me show you this as we move forward here. This is from the International Space Station. You can see right here. You can see right there. That is the eye of Hurricane Ian would be moving this direction toward the center part of Florida. We were talking about that. We were talking about the idea that Hurricane Ian would indeed be could cross the Florida Peninsula. There are other models that show it going straight north into Georgia. It remains to be seen what will happen next. It doesn't appear that there's any sound on this. We've contacted WTFX, that in Fort Myers, Florida. And we have a live feed from them. I'm going to try to get rid of that dizzying. It's kind of interesting. That is that circle right there. That thing is spinning the wrong direction. This would be fine if it was a hurricane that was down south of the equator. Okay, but this one is you can barely see my mouse right there. That one's spinning the wrong direction. So I'll go ahead and keep you from getting dizzy on that. And let me see if I can find Fox 4 News. And this would be what I was looking at earlier today. There is audio involved in this. Let me see if we can join WTFX coverage live in Fort Myers, Florida. Look at the pictures here.
Possible. And again, if the eye is passing over your storm, Trent talked about this a little earlier, and it's kind of eerie to think about, but there will be a short period of calm. But at the other side of the eye there, the wind speed rapidly increases from the hurricane. So you may hear those impacts pass by your home, and then you might hear quiet and think that it's safe to go outside. But a reminder here from our weather team and the National Weather Service that hurricane force winds could be coming from the other direction as well.
There we go. There's another emergency just coming in as you're talking about that. Extreme wind warning in effect for this area. Life, danger, threatening winds until 6 o'clock. So, and this is what we knew would come with this. I'm so sorry. Let me try to get this off.
So your phone is probably going off. You're seeing what we're seeing right now, which is the extreme wind warning until 6 p.m. Here's the other side of what it says in case you can only hear our voices and you're not able to see this for whatever reason. We just want you to have this information. Again, just as we were reading this, it says, take cover now in an interior room of a sturdy building, like a closet, something that is away from a window or a door. Protect your head from flying debris. As our Caitlin Knapp showed us, that can definitely be a factor in this situation. And again, just as we were speaking about this, do not go outside in the calm of the hurricane eye, again, because winds will quickly become dangerous again. Not gonna lie, I'm a little freaked out that we were just talking about that, and then we got that alert as well.
Yeah, and it's because we are feeling those strongest winds right on the eye wall. It sounds like another one might be coming in. And it's great that you went over those tips, because it's important to know what people should do when they are home, listening to our voices, hearing these alarms go off. And these are just all things that you can do to stay as safe as possible. Something also to keep in mind. It's probably also a little bit anxious to hear that law enforcement won't be out on the roads right now. So if you do have an emergency, though, you can still call 911 if you need anything. They actually have doctors and experts on the other line ready to talk you through any of it. And then they're going to get out to you as soon as possible if you need to.
All right. So that is WTFX coverage in Florida. That's in Fort Myers, Florida. And some of the video has just been amazing. But think about this, a storm with 155 mile per hour sustained winds. These storms are, as I've been telling you, these storms are mighty indeed. And so as we bring you this particular day's news, Ian, of course, is the biggest story. An extreme wind warning is in effect for portions of the Southwest Florida area for extremely dangerous hurricane winds. Treat these imminent extreme winds as if a tornado was approaching and move immediately to an interior room or shelter now. If you have an interior, if you happen to be in one of these storms, and God forbid you ever are, what you really want to do, and most Florida homes are built this way, there's an interior bathroom that has a pretty large, substantial bathtub, and you can literally crawl into a bathtub and put a single twin-size mattress over your head. Just over you, and that's a pretty good storm shelter. It's a little claustrophobic, etc., but that's the way you want to think about this. The type of warning that indicates the eye wall of a hurricane is coming ashore and typically reserved for wind speeds of about 115 miles per hour. Strangely enough, you'd be standing there in the middle of this torrent, this unbelievable amount of wind and rain and thunder and lightning and so on, and then all of a sudden things get a little bit softer. And then all of a sudden, the sun might even come out. Well, that's the eye of the storm going over your head. Do not think that you are through the storm, because the other half of it is coming. By the way, this storm was moving at 9 miles an hour north. It spins counterclockwise. That means that the wind speed of 155 miles an hour is functionally 164 miles an hour because of the actual movement of the storm. And then, of course, on the other side of the storm, where the wind and rain is falling, that particular part of the storm is moving slower than the other side of the storm. In other words, the apparent effect is slower. That means rain will linger longer. They call it a wet side, and they say the dirty side of the hurricane is the power side. I happen to believe that the power side is better because that's the part that gets the very serious winds. And then the rest of it is flooding, etc. We have not heard about so much about the storm surge as we thought we would but rest assured it's there. National Weather Service Director Kevin Graham, make that Ken Graham, said the storm was moving at 9 miles an hour and was indeed slowing down. It'll take 24 hours or more to cross Florida. He said 24 hours of rainfall, 24 hours of wind pushing the water. Some areas will see 2 feet of rain. Some will see a storm surge of up to 18 feet. 18 feet. That's probably taller than most of the houses that are built in Florida. This is going to be serious. A devastating storm for parts of Florida, not just on the southwest coast, but inland. It's going to be a storm we'll talk about for many, many years to come. It's an historic event. And now you understand why a lot of these houses are up on stilts because of the flooding issues. The problem with it is you put your house up on stilts, well, now you're into the wind. And that is always a mess. Georgia, South Carolina are also going to see trouble with Ian. Ian was expected to weaken after landfall, but the storm could remain near hurricane strength when it moves over Florida's east coast. That's going to happen tomorrow. It could still hold power as it approaches the northeastern Florida area, Georgia and South Carolina coasts later this week, Friday to be exact. Heavy rainfall will spread across the Florida peninsula through Thursday. Widespread, life-threatening, catastrophic flooding is expected across portions of central Florida, with considerable flooding in southern Florida, northern Florida, southeastern Georgia, and coastal South Carolina, according to the advisory. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp issued a state of emergency for the entire state and said up to 500 National Guard troops were preparing to be called up if needed. I have been a part of that mobilization with the Texas State Guard, although anything I say about the Guard is solely my responsibility. I do not speak for the Texas State Guard or the Texas Military Department. All I can tell you is that the kind of mobilization that you see is awe-inspiring. The people that have to deal with these storms, like us here in Texas, you know, we've made a great deal of progress in dealing with these storms, and the way we handled them last time was Hurricane Laura that hit Texas, and last time it was absolutely breathtaking to see just exactly how all this stuff came together to keep people out of trouble. Going through the chat room here as we are listening to the chats. Ginny Bayless says, praying for Florida. We have family that's in the path of this storm. Make sure that you keep in touch with them. Like I said, one of the cool things about life in the new millennium is the fact that everybody is carrying their communications with them. If you can get in touch with your friends, ask them to give us a call at area code 817-379-2172. That's 817-379-2172. All right, so there you go. By the way, we are praying for your family, Ms. Jenny. I hope everything's all right. Let's see, the area where, glad to hear the area where my daughter lives. It's going to not be as bad tomorrow. Yeah. 40 years I've lived in Florida. I'm in the northwest Polk County. It's a bad hurricane for the south and a rain and wind event as it crosses the East Coast. Not fun, but it's part of living there. I lived in Orlando for a couple of years, and yeah, those storms are serious. Elizabeth says, we get that high wind here in my city of Indiana where I live. Our normal is about 127 miles an hour and higher. Whoa. Let's see. Jesse has 2 friends in Florida. Our thoughts and prayers are with them. Tornado warnings now. And by the way, Elizabeth Ann says, I'll take my tornadoes over the water. Yeah, there you go. Let's see. What else? Replying to Elizabeth Ann, Florida, tornadoes are small. Hurricane winds are much worse. They're just about as powerful, and they spread over hundreds of miles. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. It's the news, analysis for fact and bias, commentary and debate. This is the Wells Report. It's what we do every single day, every single hour. We're glad that you're here. We appreciate it. By the way, the show is not on every single hour. It's not a 24-hour news channel yet. But I will tell you this. It is a broadcast that brings you honest news. And that's what we're doing today. Our telephone number, 817-379-2172. If you have friends in Florida, if you have some friends in Florida, ask them to call us and tell us what they're experiencing. 817-379-2172. We would love to hear from them. Elizabeth says, my daughter is in Orlando and works at one of the Disney parks. They shut down starting today. They were wondering what they were going to do in Disney World specifically, as to what they were going to do with this storm. And they had planned to stay open as long as they possibly could. So I guess they made the decision to go ahead and close the parks. What's interesting about Disney is all of those buildings are very carefully built to be able to withstand Category 5 hurricanes. And that's not a small task. That is not a small issue. Let me explain something to you. I drive race cars. I've raced for a long, long time. And the wind changes. The wind around the car changes at somewhere between 125 and 130 miles an hour. It gets mean. Now, you have to understand that this storm, nearly a Category 5, has sustained winds of 155 miles per hour. It's no joke. When you're at 130 miles an hour in a race car, anything that can be torn off by the wind will be. And it gets worse and worse and worse the faster you go. So all I can say is that if 130 miles an hour will tear stuff off your car, and it will, what must 155 mile an hour sustained wind be like just coursing around your house? There was this fearsome video of I'll see if I can find it during the break here at the bottom of the hour. There's this fearsome video years and years ago of a hurricane detaching the roof from a house, and you watch the thing twist slowly in the wind as it flew down range at about 100 miles an hour. You know, it's amazing. Ron White is a comedian, and he talks about people that stay to ride out these hurricanes. There was a guy he was talking about that actually lashed himself to a tree. And Ron White was famously heard to say, it's not that the wind is blowing, it's what the wind is blowing. And if you're a tough guy stashed to a tree or lashed to a tree, it really doesn't make any difference how many sit-ups you can do when you get hit by a Volvo. And that's not an overstatement. This kind of wind can literally lift a car off the ground and fly it around a little ways. I mean, we've seen some of that with tornadoes here in Dallas, Texas. I remember a piece of video showing an entire semi-tractor trailer picked up and cartwheeling through the sky before it crashed back to the ground because of a tornado. And tornado winds are essentially slightly faster and far more concentrated than a hurricane. But these things are very, very serious. It's absolutely unbelievable. So Hurricane Ian is something we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today. Coming up next, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about something else, something about technology. And we'll start with a little bit of look at what sports teams are going to be doing, and then we're going to talk about technology. There was a benchmark record set recently by a piece of technology. And I want to talk a little bit about that, and we will as we continue on the Wells Report. Once again, our telephone number, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. I'm going to see if I can find that video of the roof of a house in Florida flying off the walls. And I'll try to show that to you as we continue here on the Wells Report. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. It's what we give you every single day, Monday through Friday, 2 to 5 in the Central Time Zone. Back in just a moment. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. If you find value in this show, please share it with your friends. Please subscribe. Go ahead and hit the like button a few times if you'd like. We sure would like to do that if you would. It would help us out a lot if you would do that. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon as we bring you coverage of Hurricane Ian. There are a few things you need to be aware of. Hurricane Ian impacted college and professional sports. According to USA Today, South Florida's football game with East Carolina relocated to Boca Raton as Hurricane Ian bared down on the state. Let's see, the University of Florida, the Florida Eastern Washington football game originally scheduled for Saturday at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium in Gainesville has been moved to Sunday at noon Eastern Time. University of Central Florida, that's the college that was in Orlando, Florida, where I used to live. The UCF game against Southern Methodist, originally scheduled for Saturday at the FBC Mortgage Stadium in Orlando, which, by the way, is a very cool stadium, has been moved to Sunday, kickoff at 1 p.m. Let's see what else is going on. University of South Carolina, the Gamecocks originally going to play they were going to play South Carolina State at Williams-Brice Stadium in Columbia. It's been moved to Thursday. This, according to the school. Let's see what else. Florida State University remains optimistic it's going to be able to host the Saturday football game against Wake Forest. We'll see if that actually happens. Let's see. What do we got as the NFL considering an alternative location for Super Bowl 55 that pits the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Kansas City Chiefs? That game is scheduled for Sunday at 8:20 p.m. So they may not be playing it there. We're monitoring the storm, continue to talk to both teams, according to Brian McCarthy. Unfortunately, we've had experience in these matters. We will be ready. NHL, the Tampa Bay Lightning postponed 2 preseason games. That's going on right now. Tampa Bay Rays will be on the road for the rest of the week as they battle for an American League playoff spot during the Major League Baseball season's home stretch. So that's what's going on with the sports teams in case you happen to have anything like that going on or any interest in those things. There you have the very latest. So there are other things going on aside from Hurricane Ian. We're going to spend some time with it. We have coverage lined up. And once again, if you have people in Florida that happen to still have cell coverage, and those cell towers are pretty tough. But I don't know whether they're designed to handle 155 mile an hour winds. I'm pretty sure they're well over 100, but I'm not sure all the way over 150. So there's that. So whatever we do here, let's make sure that everybody thinks a bit about how all these people are coping. All right, as this is a very, very tough day in the country. So we're keeping our thoughts and prayers very much locked. I've been looking for some of my friends to make sure that they're okay, and have not heard back from them yet. But they live in the Tallahassee area, so we'll see what they say, and hopefully it'll all work out well. Let me see what else is going on here. All right. Let me try to explain this to you. I've been a strong devotee of technology. As you know, my dad was a part of the space program. We were space agency kids. We traveled the country with Dad, working in various projects, including the Satellite Tracking Data Acquisition Network, that routinely tracked and maintained weather satellites. And he would bring the coolest pictures of hurricanes in the Caribbean from what was a Nimbus satellite back in those days. And so technology is something I've always been fascinated with. And as time has gone by, not only am I fascinated with technology, but I'm also a little bit frightened of it. I want to show you something that I hope you see as fascinating and dreadful all at the same time. Check this out. This is a robot from Oregon State. Okay. Let me see if I can get some sound. Here we go. That's just music. Yeah, this is a bipedal robot that is running all by itself. This is a 100-meter dash. Usain Bolt, of course, as it says right there on the screen, ran the 100 meters in less than 10 seconds. This was 24 seconds. Yeah. So as you look at that, what do you see? I see a triumph of American technology. I do. And it really, actually, I actually have to admit it, I also see something that gives me a slight feeling of dread. Does it do this for you? Okay, so this is a 100-meter dash. You know, I guess my best time, I thought it was a good day when I broke 15 seconds. This thing ran it in 24 seconds. I want to ask you a question. Considering how fast technology is moving, how long do you think it's going to be before these things can outrun us? And what does that mean? What does it mean when our technology quite literally runs circles around us? Is this something that concerns you in any way? It concerns me a great deal. You know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I don't worry about these things much, or as much as you might think based on this conversation. But I got to be perfectly honest with you. I'm beginning to get a little bit unnerved about where technology is and what it's doing. I was discussing this with a friend of mine who thinks along similar lines, and I was trying to work this out so that we could get to a practical understanding of what's going on. And he said that there are so many different things. There are so many different things about how a human mind works that it will take a long, long time for technology to catch up with what our brains do. And I asked him this question. Once again, I'm not, some doomsayer. But I asked him, I said, how would you know? How will we know if that's what's happening? And he said, well, we'll be able to look at the programming and we'll be able to see what's going on. And I said, well, are you sure? What happens since there are computers that are designing other computers? I know this may seem silly, but I was watching this ostrich-like thing running across a track in Oregon, and I'm sitting there going, they're going to be able to come up with one of these that holds the world record as a bipedal robot. It holds the world record for 100 meters. And like I said, I can run 100 meters in something under 15 seconds, or used to be able to. And so this thing only has to get 10 miles an hour faster, it has to get 10 seconds faster, and it's going to run right over me. What happens when that happens? Now remember something. This thing, that robot I just showed you, is not run by remote control. That robot's autonomous. It's just running down the road. And as far as these machines being able to catch up with us, drones are faster than us right now. They're small. They're very small, but there are drones that are faster than we are. And I remember reporting when I talked about this basic thing, I talked about how there were some police agencies that were thinking about putting armament on these drones. And I sat back and I looked at that and I went, are you kidding me? Because, say, for example, you're just an average human being. And say, for example, suddenly there's this drone that appears over you and appears to be armed. What does that do to you? What does that mean to you? Anything? Well, what it means to me is I got to figure out some sort of rudimentary anti-aircraft device. That's what it meant to me almost instantly. I mean, there's a reason why police helicopters are unarmed. At least they're unarmed at this point. Do you think that's going to be the case forever? And how long is it going to be before we watch these autonomous robots being assigned a patrol sector? And how long will it be before there's an inevitable malfunction and suddenly the machine thinks there's something else going on than what actually is going on? You know what bugs me about that? Who's responsible? Do we have laws on the books that assign responsibility for that? I don't think so. Once again, I'm not trying to scare you, and I'm not trying to create some sort of bizarre, oh my God, what will happen when technology beats us to the punch? Because we may be there already. We may be there already. I see a time, probably in my lifetime, where there will be sentient computer systems that will be thinking along with you. There's already artificial intelligence that picks the wrong word for your spell check. It's unbelievable. I mean, there's already artificial intelligence that is essentially thinking on its own. It's primitive, but it does work. And there are things that are missing here. In that conversation I was having with my friend, you know, I was thinking, as time goes by, will our technology reach a point where quite literally we cannot comprehend the thought process it's going through? And what does that look like? Well, have you ever been talking to your dog, and then all of a sudden they get this quizzical look on their face and they turn their head to the side? They don't know what you're talking about, but whatever it is, they're going, what in the hell is that? That's what's going on in dog language. I don't know how that sounds in dog language. But that's kind of sort of what we're going to be dealing with. We're sort of going to be looking at these machines going, what in the hell is going on? And as long as these things are, I suppose, run by a set of ethics, we really don't have much to worry about. But what if these machines progress beyond ethics? What if these things progress beyond human ideology, even human law? What if they develop laws in and of themselves for themselves? This is not that far-fetched. I think we're going to be seeing this sometime in our lifetime. I'm 64. My grandfather passed away at age 94. I hope I can live that long, as long as I'm fulfilling a purpose, as long as I can think. As soon as I stop thinking, I'm really ready to go anytime, whenever that could happen. But that's only 20 years or so. Where do you think this is going to stop? Do you believe it's possible for human beings to hold this at bay? And if so, how does that look? Jesse asks, have you ever watched Black Mirror or The Terminator? Have you ever watched Westworld? Westworld is a little weird. When you start, that's what got me thinking about, wait a minute, these machines would be operating under their own ideas, their own thinking that may be too advanced for us to even understand at any level. How long will it be before technology surpasses humanity? And I'm pretty sure it may not happen in my lifetime, but I'm pretty sure it's going to happen in my children's lifetimes. They're in their 30s. God willing, they have another 60 years or so, probably longer, as technology improves in how to keep track of and take care of human beings. But so, this one ostrich-like device running down a track in Oregon, 24 seconds. That, by the way, a new world's record for bipedal autonomous robots. How long will it be before they're faster than us. And what will that mean? What will that mean? You are listening to I have one other thing. What happens when the golf cart that you're riding on, is smarter than you and decides that, it's tired of watching you screw up the game? It just drives you into a water hazard because it's tired of watching you screw up the game that it loves so much? It's possible. This is the Wells Report. John David Wells at your service. Back with more coming up in just a couple of minutes as we continue. This is, what is this, Wednesday? Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. If you have somebody that lives in Florida and they have a working cell phone, ask them to call us. I sincerely would appreciate it. Gavin Mealy has joined us. Gavin, thanks very much for your gift of a donation. By the way, if you would like to follow in Gavin's footsteps and support this broadcast financially, all you got to do is go to Patreon, patreon.com/The Wells Report. And you can sign up for $1, $2, $5, something along that line a month. Okay, so we are the least expensive of the subscription services. This is essentially a 3-hour newscast with analysis, commentary, and debate. So if you feel like you'd like to put your money where my mouth is, follow in the footsteps of Gavin Mealy, and head over to Patreon, patreon.com/The Wells Report. Gavin, I'm glad you're here. Thanks very much for joining us. So Katie Couric is on our minds today, along with people of Florida. She has been a long advocate of preventative cancer screening. She lost her first husband, Jay Monahan, to colon cancer in 1998. It was one of the queasiest moments of my broadcasting career when Katie Couric went ahead and televised her subsequent screening colonoscopy. It was, like I said, it made me kind of queasy. And that, of course, gave rise to all kinds of different exams, et cetera, being on your evening news. In fact, she had been visiting her doctor, and her doctor said, hey, you need to make an appointment for a mammogram ASAP. Now, I don't know whether that was because of a quick exam in the office during a physical or what the situation was. But the doctor said, make an appointment. She did. And she got her screening mammogram June 20th. As she was undergoing the procedure, she handed the technician her cell phone and asked her to record the process. But as they were scanning, they saw abnormal results. The doctors asked immediately if they would stop recording. Next day, the doctor called back and confirmed the abnormal tissue that was found on the mammogram was indeed cancer. Couric wrote in an essay published on her Katie Couric Media website, I felt sick. The room started to spin. I was in the middle of an open office, so I walked to a corner and spoke quietly, my mouth unable to keep up with the questions swirling in my head. She's 65 years old, and she thought about the people in her family that she'd lost. Throughout the process, she kept thinking the same things, how lucky I was to have access to such incredible care. It made me feel grateful and guilty at the same time. And then she revealed that she had finished her last round of radiation yesterday. That's a day before revealing the diagnosis to the world today. She added another than her chest looking like she had been sunbathing topless. She felt just fine. And that's good to know. Our thoughts with Katie Couric today as she goes through all of this. And Katie Couric is somebody that I have not necessarily agreed with both journalistically and certainly politically, but she is someone that spent decades on NBC's Today Show and should have been there. She was very good at what she did. She texted this: every 2 minutes, a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer in the United States. June 21st, I became one of them. As we approach Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I want to share my personal story with you and encourage you to get screened and understand you may fall into a category of women who needs more than a mammogram. Then she leaves a link to katiecouric.com, KATIECOURIC.com, so that you can read the entire essay. She's healing from treatment. She said she wanted to spread the message about the importance of getting an annual mammogram, also giving a warning that many women with dense breasts, and she says she is one of those, may want to get some additional screening. I was 6 months late this time. I shudder to think what might have happened had I put it off any longer. So one of the things that, Susan and I have always been very careful of is we take care of our health. And what happened one time is that I was scheduling Susan for her yearly physical and so on and so forth. We had a house guest named Kim. And Kim was someone who had been always exceptionally queasy about going to the doctor, never wanted to go. And I said, so I did not know that when I asked, so when was your last checkup? And she said, I have never gotten one. And so I, without asking, I made an appointment for her to go with Susan. And she did. They found something. Thankfully, she's perfectly fine now. But it was something that they found that could have killed her had she gone another year or so, just like Katie Couric. She had blown it off this year. I'll do it next year. Well, maybe not so much. not so much. Stacy K says hi. How's it going, man? How's everything? You all right? Good to have you here. Thanks very much for joining us on the Wells Report as we take a look at Hurricane Ian making landfall in southwest Florida. Category 4 plus, nearly a Category 5 hurricane, 155 mile an hour sustained winds. That is unbelievable. And it's happening right now to our friends in Florida. If you happen to be one of those, give us a call, 817-379-175. I don't know why I gave you that number. 817-379-2172. Give us a call. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us, my friends. We'll be back with more right after the top of the hour. Have yourself a good one, and I'll be back. I'll be back. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We bring you the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We analyze the news and then we comment on it. That commentary is not the news. It's simply opinion, just as valuable as yours. So share it, which leads us to debate. In other words, we talk things over. What does all of this mean as we live in perhaps one of the most devastatingly, shall we say, interesting times in the human existence? There's an ancient Chinese curse that I like to quote from time to time. It is, "May you live in interesting times." Well, here we are. Hurricane Ian has made landfall. It happened last hour. A Category 4 hurricane is what we're looking at here. Extremely dangerous. The hurricane came ashore near Cayo Costa with maximum sustained winds at 150 miles an hour. The minimum pressure from the Air Force Reconnaissance Hurricane Hunters was 940 millibar. I don't know what that meant. I don't know what that means. But these are maximum sustained winds, somewhere north of 150 miles an hour. Unbelievable. Hurricane Ian has knocked out the power to the police's emergency operations center at Marco Island. The Marco Island Police Department reports via Twitter, connectivity to our operations center is out, including non-emergency phones and primary and secondary Wi-Fi at Marco Island PD. If you have an emergency, please call 911. Marco Island said Hurricane Ian knocked out power to their operations centers. How bad is this hurricane? How bad is this hurricane? 18 minutes ago, it was reported that Waffle House has shut down their locations in Florida. The beloved restaurant franchise? I don't know that Waffle House is a beloved restaurant franchise. Perhaps you could share whether or not you are in love with your Waffle House. I've eaten at Waffle House a few times. It's good. Waffle House is good. You know, it doesn't happen very often, but I think it's going to happen more because there's a Waffle House that's being built in our neighborhood right next to a Quick Car. So I guess what you could do is you go get your car inspected or get the oil change done or whatever, some light work, and then head over to Waffle House for a quick waffle. Anyway, the Waffle House is closing. Unbelievable. So there's this unbelievable picture here. A look at floodwaters reaching the home in Fort Myers, Florida. They were looking for a storm surge. Let me see if I can make this picture. Let's see if I can make this picture any bigger. I don't think I can. That's too bad, too. Let me see if I can find nope. I can't make this any bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically just going to show it to you anyway. So let me see if I can make this as big as I possibly can and give you an idea of what they're dealing with when it comes to floodwaters in Florida right now. Take a look at that. Take a look at this right here. That's a typical house. What is that? 15 feet off the ground? Submerged. Unbelievable. So that's what they're dealing with in Florida at this particular moment. Floridians are beginning to lose power. Outages top 624,000 categories. As the Category 4 hurricane made landfall today. Hours earlier, by the way, outages totaled approximately 35,000. Well, that's getting a lot worse. Let's check Fox News Channel's coverage of this storm. Let's see if we can dip into their coverage. Fox News Channel has been all over this. Let's join their coverage here on the Wells Report for just a couple of seconds. Once again, Fox News Channel is giving you this.
Reporting from there, the surge is just destructive. We're seeing images, Neil, from their homes with water up to the roof lines. Just terrible. We left there as the surge began to come in because there was no high ground and we knew we would lose vehicles and it just would be a bad situation. I hope that people left those homes and evacuated because if they did not, it's going to be a seriously bad issue. To the south of me, Naples, they saw wind gusts of 112 miles per hour earlier today, and the visuals out of there. We're seeing boats in parking lots at the base of some of those big high rises. I have family there. As more debris just goes by that have told me the power went out at about 8 a.m. And indeed, from their windows looking down, just random boats that are floating in parking lots, just so destructive. In this area, it was so many different people and such a beautiful part of the U.S. From a business point of from a personal standpoint, it's just going to be devastating in the days to come. But aid is on the way, according to Governor DeSantis, in so many different forms, National Guard, utility workers. And, we're going to do what Americans do after a system like this comes in. We're going to help each other. That I know. But right now, the nightmare continues here in this part of the state. Unbelievable, Neil.
Very, very hard to hear me, but I understand, and you mentioned it, that a lot of people were ordered to evacuate, but not as many as the mayor had hoped did. I'm wondering, they have to wait a long while then for someone to get to them if there are any problems, right?
Oh, hugely. And I'll give you a prime example of that. This morning when we were on the coast, on the beach, Cape Coral, just to the north of where we were at Fort Myers Beach, decided that when the winds hit 45 miles per hour, which they did, they were going to stop emergency services to keep their own people safe. So that's exactly what has happened. And God forbid people are stranded in those homes or anywhere on those places where the surge came in. I can't even imagine trying to survive in a situation like that. Not only the surge, but the wind, like what you're seeing here, and the rains. I pray for them. I hope that people heeded the warnings, but power outages continue to go up, and so does the debris of trees, structures, and really anything that this wind can put its claws into. Ian is throwing haymakers right now and has been all day long, unfortunately.
Hang in there, my friend. Robert Ray in Fort Myers on all that. Rick Reichman's with us right now.
Robert Ray needs to do himself a favor and get off that street. Did you see those palm fronds going by? In case you don't know, I happen to live there for a while. But those palm fronds are incredibly heavy. Now, Rick Reichmuth is currently giving us a forecast. He's a meteorologist. Let's check in with him here on Fox News Channel.
That means prolonged impacts. Imagine if you've got 150 mile an hour wind, say even 100 mile an hour wind that hits you for a minute. That's one thing. Have it hit you for an hour or hit you in a prolonged period of time. That just causes all kinds of additional damage. So I just want to point this out. This came on shore near Cayo Costa, Florida. That's the exact same spot that Charlie came on shore in 2004, which is just unbelievable. That town needs to do some sort of a marketing event after this, because they've had two of these massive Category 4 storms make landfall in the exact same spot. Latest readings, now that it's moving, the center is beginning to move over land. We've got winds coming down a little bit, 145 mile an hour sustained. The pressure's coming up. It is still moving at the same 100 or only at 9 miles an hour. So that forward progression going to continue to be really slow. Want to show you this. This is the latest reading out of Punta Gorda, 123 mile an hour wind gusts and sustained at 84 miles an hour. Go up to the north side of the storm. You've got gusts at 68 in Sarasota, 79 in Venice, and the sustained winds there into the 40s and 50s. Now, want to point this out. If you've got a center of a storm, you maybe get into that eye. If you're on the north side or the south side in this case, or the left or the right side of it, you don't get out of that at all, and you are prolonged winds. So that's what we've been seeing down around the Naples area and up around Venice, just a prolonged period of this wind, and that's why we're going to see, I think, more damage. Now, what does happen is now that we've about to get the back eye wall here, move on shore, the wind direction is going to change. So think of all of that debris and stuff on your house that was maybe weakened from the first batch of wind that comes through. Now you're going to have wind coming from the complete opposite direction, and that will cause additional damage. So starting to see on the radar picture here, you see where the eye is, where there's no weather going on really, so to speak. And then this is all about to change. This slow-moving storm, Neil, just means prolonged period for things like rain and tornadoes. Tornado watch will continue throughout the day today across much of Florida, by tomorrow as well, even just a little bit farther towards the north. And take a look at this. National Weather Service doesn't do this very often, where they issue a high risk for flash flooding. We've got this even all the way across the eastern shore here of Florida, the other coast, because of this prolonged period of very heavy rain. Some spots are going to still see an additional maybe 18, 20 inches of rain. Take a look at that bullseye right now in the latest model run there on the other side towards Daytona Beach. So power outages, flash flooding, interior areas, the storm surge that is ongoing right now, that'll begin to subside here over the next couple hours, but we still have a long road to go. Neil?
All right. So there you go. Neil Cavuto and Rick Reichmuth joining us here on the Wells Report. We want to thank them very much for that coverage. These people do a really good job. They have been doing an incredible job with regard to their storm coverage. A lot of the times what ends up happening is it's kind of contrived. I mean, you're standing out there on a beach, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody's going to be on a beach today. And that's because the storm surge is 18 feet, 12 to 18 feet, depending on where you happen to be. And it is something that it's amazing to watch. These guys usually stand out there and do what I guess it was Ron Roberts, that was his name, standing out in the middle of the street. Well, I was actually considerably worried about it because I was going to tell you that those palm fronds are very, very heavy. And they're being thrown around like little pieces of lint in a dryer. And not only are they heavy, but they're sharp. Those palm fronds will cut you. They're very akin to sawgrass. Sawgrass is a grass with a very, very rough edge that will cut you, and so on and so forth. But these palm fronds they're talking about, those are sable palms that I saw because I had those in my front yard. And they're kind of weapons when they get whipped up by the wind and start flying through the air. Like Ron White said, it's not that the wind is blowing; it's what the wind is blowing. And these correspondents need to realize that it's incredibly dangerous to be out doing what they're doing. So when you see these people, and you've seen it so often, you see it so often where people are standing there, et cetera, and they're miserable and they're standing in a hurricane and they're bravely doing this. Well, sooner or later, we're going to watch somebody actually get picked up and blown down the street. And that's not going to be a good day. It's not going to be a good day. By the way, Jube Dankworth, netmediaconsultants.com. Jube is one of the very few number of people that work on this broadcast. She's our publicist. She says mandatory evacuation yesterday was just 10 feet if your property was up to 10 feet above sea level. So, yeah, I mean, so when you start talking about a storm surge of 18 feet and you happen to be somewhere on the flood curve that is at 10 feet, you're about to see 8 feet of water course through your house. And that is, by the way, something that's truly incredible when you start thinking about it. And that is the fact that these houses are built for this. It's truly impressive to see. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of moments as we continue for this very, very busy day. This very, very busy day as we look at hurricane. Actually, I'm trying to figure out here. You know what I'm thinking? Yeah, I'm thinking that we've got to stop right this very minute. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We'll be back with more coming up in a moment on the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us today. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. Support this broadcast. Support the report. Subscribe. Pass it along to your friends. Hit the like button. And make sure you ring the bell so that whenever we're on the air, you get a little notice so you can join us. It would be very, very good. And if you would like to support the show financially, that would be very cool too. You can go to patreon.com/The Wells Report, patreon.com/The Wells Report. It's a growing family of people that think this show is worthwhile. And it is awesome and incredibly humbling. And I thank you very much for everybody that's signed up to help us out. It means a lot to me, especially the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, not the actual department. The Department of Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Department of Transportation is not supporting this broadcast. Some people that work there, well, they are. And I want to thank them very much for their stalwart support of this broadcast. And people are actually throwing money on it. It means a lot to me. And more about that in just a little bit. But my friends at the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, the friends, not the actual organization. I don't want to get anybody into trouble up there. But they listen every day, and it means so much. Hurricane Ian will very likely go down as one of the strongest hurricanes to ever strike Florida, as a Category 4 storm has landed at Cayo Costa, Florida this afternoon. He came ashore with maximum winds of 150 miles an hour. That's 7 miles an hour short of a Category 5 storm on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Punta Gorda, Florida, reported a gust of 124 miles an hour as the eye wall moved inland. As it stands, only 3 other hurricanes have hit Florida with stronger winds. A fourth has matched Ian. Labor Day of 1935, this was before they started naming these storms, sustained winds of 185 miles an hour with a pressure down to 892 millibar. I mean, that is very, very low pressure. That was in 1935. Andrew in 1992, 165 miles an hour. The pressure there was 922 millibar. Michael, 2018, 160 mile an hour sustained winds, 919 millibar for a pressure reading. And then Hurricane Ian is also at 150 with 940. That's the millibar. We just reported that. It was 942 a second ago. And then Hurricane Charlie in 2004 had 941 millibar and 150 mile an hour winds. 150 mile an hour winds. There are an awful lot of people that are looking at all this and saying, my goodness gracious, the climate change is causing more intense storms. Well, if you look at the hurricanes that have crossed Florida, they're actually getting weaker, not stronger. But the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration reanalysis of the hurricane found that maximum sustained winds of 185 miles an hour impacted the Florida Keys September 2nd, 1935. Hurricane Andrew, one of the most infamous Category 5 hurricanes to ever strike the U.S., happened August 24th, 1992. The storm was blamed for more than 5 dozen deaths, caused $27 billion. In 1992, by the way, in case you're wondering, that's more than $57 billion in today's money. Holy moly. Holy moly. So a big storm. Speaking of big storms, there is, as you know, a very big political storm that's happening somewhere around 5 weeks from now. Some 45 days. 45 days from today is the midterm election. And there is electoral news, maybe not necessarily about the midterms, but we'll take a look at that. And some other things as we continue on the Wells Report. Our telephone number, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. News, analysis, commentary, debate. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. If you have somebody that you know who's living in Florida, please, by all means, give them that telephone number, 817-379-2172. Let's see. Reached out to a couple of friends of mine to see how they were doing. I asked if this person was okay, and the answer was great. Thanks for checking. And I asked how do the next couple of days look, and the answer was long. Yeah. So let me type back. Best of luck. Let's see. Prayers for your safety. Okay. So I hope you're sending those encouraging prayers to your friends in Florida as well. There are other things, other stories, and so on that we need to discuss. One of them involves a guy named Mitch McConnell. He is the Republican leader in the United States Senate. He is also known as the Senate Minority Leader. Yesterday endorsed a bill. This happened right after we got off the air, or you would have heard it yesterday on the Wells Report. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell endorsed a bill to remove the ambiguity that politicians say helped lead to the January 6th assault on the Capitol by a mob loyal to Donald Trump seeking to halt certification of Joe Biden's presidential victory. By the way, we point out, when I talk about analysis of the news, we point out fact and bias. This is bias here. The assumption is that the mob's intent was to halt certification of Joe Biden's presidential victory. The actual truth of that is that President Trump just wanted them to make sure that they spoke their mind. In other words, the people that were certifying the election heard their voice. And to think that it was about halting the certification of Joe Biden's presidential victory might be a stretch. It may not be, but I just wanted to make sure that we put that out there. Mitch McConnell's support all but ensures passage of what is called a Bipartisan Editorial Account Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act, which could be approved in the coming weeks. The measure would make clear the vice president's role during the tally of electoral votes is purely ceremonial, would make it more difficult for lawmakers to challenge and delay the count of a particular state's results. I don't agree with this law. I do not agree with this law. This law was essentially unchallenged. It has gone many, many years, over a century, in fact. It's gone that long without a problem until the 2020 election. And I'll have more commentary on that in just a couple of moments. All right. So what it does is it makes the vice president's role during the tally of the Electoral College votes purely ceremonial. It would also make it more difficult for lawmakers to challenge and delay the account of a particular state's results. It also bars legislatures from appointing their own electors that would go against how their state voted. Clearly, when a 150-year-old law has successfully brought us certainty, finality, and one orderly presidential inauguration after another, we need to be delicate and careful with any changes, said McConnell, this during a Rules and Administration Committee hearing yesterday to move the bill forward. But the chaos that came to a head on January 6th last year strongly suggests we find careful ways to clarify and streamline the process. The House, by the way, passed a similar measure last week. Lawmakers are trying to update the Electoral Account Act because the 1887 law was central to Trump's strategy to overturn the 2020 election, which played out the same day as the Capitol attack. By law, January 6th is when Congress is required to count Electoral College votes for president from the states, historically an uncontroversial, largely symbolic ceremony 2 months after the election. Trump lawyer John Eastman proposed a strategy for his supporters in 7 key states that President Biden won to send alternate states of electors to Congress. Rules Committee Chairwoman Amy Klobuchar said the Electoral Account Act was largely overlooked for more than a century because the power had transitioned peacefully from Republican to Democrat and back again. But it was at the center of a plan to overturn the 2020 election and the will of the American people that, as we all know, who work here, culminated in a violent mob desecrating the Capitol. On that day, enemies of our democracy sought to use this antiquated law to subvert the results of a free and fair election. It's essential we come together to take action to ensure that it never happens again. So this hasn't been passed yet. I don't know whether it will be held up for any reason, what have you, but I do disagree with the law. Before we get to that, let me point out a couple of things here. Amy Klobuchar referred to the Capitol as a sacred, desecrating the Capitol, as if it was sacred. The Capitol building of the United States is not sacred. You cannot desecrate the Capitol of the United States. It's just a building. It is just a building. It has not been consecrated by any religion. In fact, it would be absolutely unconstitutional to do that, right? To do that. So consequently, what we have here is a circumstance where you don't refer to the Capitol building as something that could be desecrated. All right? That is awful. The other thing that bugs me about this, and I'm going to talk about this here in just a couple of moments. The other thing that bothers me is in her statement, she talks about, once again, about stealing the election. Let's spend a little bit of time dealing with that. Okay? I'm not saying that the 2020 election was stolen. I'm not. But I am saying that there were clear problems with it. Joe Biden is our president. He was elected. But there were still problems with that election. Now, if, and I mean if, and once again, this is my opinion, this is not news, but if you're one of those people who believe that there was fraud in the 2020 election, and I am not, but if you happen to believe there was fraud in the election, you're in a position where suddenly you're dealing with the idea that you have to deal with the idea that this particular sharpening of the Electoral Account Act could be part of something close to a cover-up. I'm not saying it is. But if you are someone who believes that there were issues with the 2020 election, again, I'm not one of those people. How can you not believe that this is the next step to try to cover up what happened during that election? That is something that has to be at least thought about at some level by some people. So once again, for over 150 years, this law functioned just fine until the election of 2020. What do they call this thing? Let me double check this. Let me get the right name. I should have written it down. It's called the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act. You know, do we even need that law? I really don't think so. I mean, the people that are responsible for the violence at the Capitol building, and there were people that were responsible for violence, they're being prosecuted. Some say in a far too heavy-handed way, but they are being prosecuted. The business of the Capitol was delayed, not overturned. So once again, this is kind of a shoulda, coulda, woulda. And so that being said, we are functioning pretty much as it should be. But let me ask you this. As we reduce the vice president's role in this electoral count process, and we make it more difficult for legislators to turn aside the supposed popular vote from their states. As we go through all this, let's take a quick moment to think about the following. What if there actually is a statewide problem with an election? What if there actually is? How are we going to be able to do the right thing, especially, say, for example, if there's a problem with an election where, at this particular moment in our political climate, where a Democrat was elected under suspicious means? What will we be able to do? Will some Democrat bravely point at the law and say, we can't do anything, it's all done, it's in the cake, it's done, e pluribus unum? Now the way we do electoral college politics, and for people that don't understand what the Electoral College does, each state of the United States of America tabulates their votes among the registered voters of their state. And whoever wins those electoral college, whoever wins the election in that state receives the electoral college votes from that state. It is a gentleman's agreement, gentle person's agreement, between electors and the governor of the particular state to be named. They don't necessarily have to vote that way. It's a check and balance to avoid voter fraud. But a lot of people keep spoiling for doing away with the Electoral College. Well, that would mean that the voters of North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, many states would not matter whatsoever. There would be no need for anybody in Wyoming to ever vote because there are more people living in New York City than in the entire state of Wyoming. The framers of this nation created the United States of America. It is a representative democracy. Those representatives come from the various states by way of the various states' voters. To elect a president without the Electoral College would disenfranchise anyone, any state that did not have a population greater than New York and California for all intents and purposes. And what does that mean? Well, that means you can forget anybody else ever being elected to the presidency that isn't a Democrat. Or for that matter, whoever enacts the law. But right now it would be a Democrat project. And since most of the people living in those great big cities, New York, Chicago, LA, since most of those people living in those great big cities are indeed either Democrats or leftists, the people that live anywhere else, what's cynically called flyover country in the United States, would be completely left out of presidential elections forever. And yes, Gary Abshire points out that getting rid of the Electoral College would take a constitutional amendment. A constitutional amendment, which would require ratification by 3/4 of the states. So that's probably not something that we're going to see happen. But it is out there. So if that's something that we're not going to see happen, once again, why are we passing this law? Well, what they're trying to do is they say that it would circumvent something like a January 6th. And I have to say this. And once again, I'm not spoiling for trouble. I do have to say this. If there is indeed something that is obviously wrong with a presidential election, then the people of the United States will act, just as they did on January 6th, 2021. They will act. And no legislation designed to make their actions fruitless is going to stop them from acting. You know, it's like these politicians honestly believe that just because they've passed a law, that everybody is immediately going to fall in line and follow it. That is not the case. That is simply not the case. We have in the Constitution an ability to redress our grievances with our government. To me, that's what the January 6th riot was all about. Did it get out of hand? Yes. Do I believe that there were people of the other side that were spoiling for a fight and got one? Yes. I'm very concerned about what happens in the future with this law that's supposedly going to make this a ceremonial issue when it's not necessary. This is the Wells Report. Back in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. It's Wednesday, the 28th day of September, year of our Lord 2022. Hurricane Ian is lashing Florida just barely less than a Category 5 hurricane. The winds are slowing as Hurricane Ian is crossing the Florida peninsula. Most tracks now have it heading across the peninsula, brushing the bottom part of Georgia and maybe South Carolina, but I doubt it. Certainly the rain bands will get out there. But then it's going to re-enter the Atlantic Ocean and follow the Gulf Stream northward, probably gaining more strength and becoming a genuine Category 5 hurricane before all is said and done. More details coming up after the top of the hour here on the Wells Report. And thank you very much for being with us today. The number of U.S. military veterans serving in Congress. I did not know this. This is from Fox News. The number of U.S. military veterans serving in Congress is at its lowest level since World War II. Now, there's a little warpage in those statistics. And the reason there's warpage is because just about everybody that could fought in World War II. So there would be a great many veterans available to the electorate. But that being said, so this is kind of a statistical wobble, but a pro-military political action committee with a mission to help elect Republicans with military experience to Congress is trying to get more veterans to run for office. They're called the Frontline Patriots PAC. They are seeking to, quote, promote and elect principled conservative veteran leadership to Congress who have a deep understanding of courage, conviction, and love of country that only true service can bring, unquote. To date, Frontline Patriots has raised a total of $133,000 and has served as a central repository for resources sharing between members of Congress and their leadership PACs and Win Red accounts, whose contributions are also directed toward endorsed veteran candidates. Now, this particular organization, pretty darn successful. They boast a 78% win record with their endorsements for candidates in House races around the country. 20 of the 25 Frontline Patriots endorsed candidates made up a third of all National Republican Congressional Committee Young Gun candidates in the 2022 cycle. That's pretty impressive. There are 91 veterans in the 117th Congress, 74 of which serve in the House, 17 serve in the Senate. That total is 5 fewer than the 116th Congress, marks the lowest total of veterans serving in Congress since World War II. This, according to the American Legion. Of the military veterans currently serving in Congress, 28 are Democrats, 63 Republican, and more than half of them served in overseas and combat deployments. That's nice. Speaking about the effectiveness and importance of the Frontline Patriots PAC work, Florida GOP Representative Michael Waltz, who served in the military for more than 20 years and is the first retired Green Beret to be elected to the House of Representatives, told Fox News Digital he has spearheaded the efforts to help elect Republican veterans to Congress in 2022, calling it the year of the GOP veteran. The premise is if you're willing to die for your country, then you're willing to take on tough votes, roll up your sleeves, and come back and get the job done. This according to Waltz, who formerly served as a defense policy director at the Pentagon. In the 1970s, 3/4 of the Congress, Republican and Democrat House and Senate, were vets. 75%. Now we're sitting around 15%. It's a record low in our nation's history. I'm convinced that it's a big part of the explanation why we have record amounts of dysfunction. Well, those are harsh words. Quote, it's not that we will agree on every issue just because we're a veteran. We won't and we don't, but the value and the ethos are the value and the ethos that we bring is what their reason for having veterans in Congress. Quote, in the foxhole, out on the plane, out on a ship, nobody cares about black, white, or brown. Nobody cares about race, religion, socioeconomic background. All you care about is taking care of the men and women to your left and right and getting the job done. You are in an objective mindset. Hooah. In combat, if you don't achieve your mission, really bad things happen. I think too many people come into Congress these days don't have a mindset or that mindset. And that's why you see the nation's problems dragging on and on and on. Might take a little issue with that with you, sir, but we'll keep going. The other thing is that we have really clear-eyed appreciation for how great this country is. Describing basic freedoms in America that are often taken for granted, Walt said that serving abroad deepens a veteran's appreciation for the homeland. I think it's the mindset, the work ethic, quotes the sergeant, the ethos that we need a lot more of. Adding that the authenticity factor for veteran candidates seeking office in the coming midterm elections is an undeniable, not just advantage, but a resource. Touting the PAC's more than 24 endorsements, Waltz said Frontline Patriots PAC is proud to serve. That's not. That's a. It's Patriots. That is a what they call a typographical error. Frontline Patriots PAC is proud to support first-time veteran candidates who have been running around the world getting shot at for decades and have decided to serve in a different way. Good for them. Good for them. I hope they do well, because we absolutely must stop electing politicians and start electing our neighbors. Don't you think? This is the Wells Report. John David Wells at your service. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of minutes. Hour number 3, in fact, for Wednesday, the 28th day of September. See you in just a minute. And in just a minute, we shall returneth. Thanks very much for being here with us today. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. We honestly report the news every single day between 2 and 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, Monday through Friday on this broadcast. You can find us as podcasts all over the internet, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. When I hear from people that watch the podcasts, I sincerely appreciate it. It means a lot to me. So what we're doing at this particular moment is we are bringing you coverage of Hurricane Ian. And Hurricane Ian is a bad man. He is currently crossing right at Fort Myers, Florida, on the west coast of Florida, headed over the Florida Peninsula, weakening slightly. And what we want to do is we want to bring you some of the very latest. This from 4 minutes ago. People are trapped by water in their homes, according to Florida Collier County Sheriff's Office. That happened in a Facebook post today. There's some tough news you need to know. We're not holding back. We are in triage mode. We are getting a significant number of calls of people trapped by water in their homes. Quote, some are reporting life-threatening medical emergencies in deep water. We will get to them first. Some are reporting water coming into their house, but not life-threatening. They will have to wait. Possibly until the water recedes. According to the statement, Lee County 911 system is down. Calls are being rerouted to the Collier County Sheriff. 7 minutes ago, the governors of North Carolina and South Carolina declared states of emergency in preparation of Hurricane Ian's potential impact. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper and South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster both said the move allows them to activate emergency plans and additional resources. Quote, it's still too early to know exactly how Hurricane Ian will affect South Carolina, but preparations at the state level are well underway, and this declaration of emergency is another step in that process. Cooper also activated about 80 members of the North Carolina National Guard for storm response. By the way, my son Mitchell is a part of the North Carolina National Guard, but because of the nature of his duty at this particular moment, will very likely not roll to assist either Florida or South Carolina. According to Governor Cooper's office, the emergency declaration removes size restrictions for vehicles involved in storm response and agriculture. The state of emergency is needed now so that farmers and those preparing for the storm can move quickly to get ready for the heavy rain that's likely to fall in much of the state. The National Hurricane Center said the storm is expected to bring heavy rain and storm surges to some East Coast states into the weekend. CNN meteorologist, let me see if I can figure out who that is. A CNN meteorologist. It doesn't say who. The water levels in Fort Myers, Florida, continue to rise even after the landfall of Hurricane Ian. Well, that's because the storm is dragging the water with it. The storm surge is still pushing inland. Water levels have risen more than 6 feet over the past 7 hours, still rising as strong winds push Gulf of Mexico water onshore. Hurricane Ian has already pushed waters higher than ever observed in Fort Myers, which started measurements in 1965. 34 minutes ago, more than 1 million customers are without power in Florida, according to Power Outage US. The site reports that Lee County, home to Fort Myers, take two. The site reports that Lee County, home to Fort Myers and Cape Coral, is still the most affected, with more than 330,000 power outages, which represent more than 70% of the utility's customers. Collier County, which includes Naples and Marco Island, has more than 151,000 customers out of power. In Sarasota County, which includes the cities of Sarasota and Siesta Key, there are more than 182,000 customers in the dark, according to the site. It's pretty bad. Target is closing stores or modifying store hours at 70 of its locations in Florida that are in the immediate path of Hurricane Ian, according to the retailer. I wonder if they're going to leave their restrooms open to transgender people. I certainly hope so. Residents across the state braced for Ian's full impact after the powerful Category 4 storm may landfall today. Stores saw a rush of customers stocking up on essential and emergency supplies, bottled water, food, flashlights. Target said it is mobilizing its supply chain to fast-track critical supplies in the coming days to its stores in impacted areas. Walmart said it was also temporarily closing its stores in areas that are in the storm's path as safety measures. Walmart said it would give emergency assistance to pay employees in the affected stores, as well as displacement assistance to employees that are mandatorily evacuated. Regardless of loss of power and reopening after the storm's passing, we've taken steps to give us the best opportunity to resume normal operations once it's safe to do so, according to Walmart in a statement. Finally, 1 hour, 9 minutes ago, Hurricane Ian is now tied with Hurricane Charley in 2004 as the strongest storm to make landfall on the west coast of the Florida Peninsula. This according to CNN meteorologist Brandon Miller. Most of the storms hit the coast, both of those storms rather, hit the coast with 150 mile per hour winds. So what we're doing at this particular moment, we have CNN contributing to our coverage. We want to thank them very much. Jake Tapper is on the line, and let's listen to a little bit about what's going on. He's got a correspondent from Bradenton, Florida. Let's listen in on CNN coverage here on the Wells Report on this very stormy day in Florida.
We were anticipating this because earlier this morning we had a northeasterly wind that was coming up, and now that the eye wall is just scraping to the south of us, the direction of the wind has changed. And why that's important is because it's literally making these kind of vortexes, almost little eddies of wind off of the building, and they become so violent they almost slap you in the face when they come off of these buildings, and it becomes extremely intense. We have walked around within this area, been doing live shots for several hours, and we've noticed transformers lighting up the skies, literally knocking out some of the communication to my producers, the electricity and the blocks behind me, the all too familiar sounds of alarms going off in the buildings here as the water seeps into some of the local businesses within this area. I don't know if you just heard that sound, but that's the sign, that road sign there, shaking back and forth. And that is why we take the precautions that we do. I've got people on either side of me looking out for that type of thing. But those things can become projectiles very easily in winds like this. So we're going to monitor that. And we have also seen a reversal of what was the easterly winds taking the storm surge or the river water from the Manatee River over my left. There's one of those intense wind gusts out of the river here. And now that the wind direction has changed, we have seen that water start to come back in. So storm surge here, still a concern. When we talk about the rapid intensification of Major Hurricane Ian upon its arrival, you guys got to bear with me on this. These gusts are making it difficult for us to stand up.
Derek, why don't you go someplace safe right now? I'm getting concerned about you. Why don't you go someplace safe?
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, why don't you go to someplace safe?
We will do that.
Please do that.
That was a good call by Jake Tapper
Okay,
right
please
there.
do-
That was
please do
good because,
that
like
right
I
now.
said, one of these
Instead
guys is going to go
weird,
flying down the
Florida
street
right
one of
now.
these days.
Bill, you're in the eye of Hurricane Ian. Tell us what you're seeing.
Yeah, welcome to the eye. It's a dirty eye. We don't have blue sky, but we have parrots flying around. We have folks who have been hunkered down walking their pets, a Floridian tradition in the eye of the hurricane. Tom Sater talking about the saturated ground and the trees coming down. Lots of examples here in Punta Gorda. This trailer from downtown Bait and Tackle flipped twice. It rolled over in the storm. The wind put it back on its wheels. As luck would have it, we've got pieces of siding wrapped around this tree over here, and wow, look at the size of this big tree down at the end. Now, of course, this is not over. We're only halfway through this as a result of the eye moving over us right now. Those folks not familiar might be lured into thinking, oh, the worst of it is over, but the back end of this storm could still be nasty, and that is what will bring up the storm surge that we're most worried about. This is our hotel here. Luckily, we have a generator. We hope they crank that thing up because we lost our power a few hours ago.
Yeah, that, by the way, that generator is pre-positioned for this very scenario here.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm just distracted by what I'm seeing up
Sorry, I
here.
didn't mean to interrupt you.
Wow, look at the size of this tree coming down. Again, this is one of those times when the authorities would say, don't go check your properties during the eye of the hurricane. Don't do this. We're doing this for you. But it's just a little taste of what's happened due to those 110 mile an hour plus wind speeds we had here at Punta Gorda. That is, they probably were higher than that, but the wind meter at the instrument actually broke at the Punta Gorda airport. So we don't know exactly how high it got, but wow, there's just one little example of the force of these winds here as well. So many of the homes in this area and then going south of us are on canals. So we're really interested, once it's safe, to get out into these areas, Jake, and look at the flooding, because that is the life changer. They really battened down the hatches in this town after Charlie 18 years ago, up the building codes. But these storm surge warnings that we've gotten are really unprecedented. This will be a first-time test for how you adapt to these new, stronger storms on a warmer planet as a result of climate change. But we're gonna head back inside and brace for the second storm.
That's what I wanted to ask.
All right, so that's Jake Tapper and his broadcast with their coverage. Interesting that the guy walking around looking at uprooted trees and so on and so forth managed to be able to get a statement in there about global climate change. As we have talked about last hour, in case you're wondering, we were looking at the top 4 storms that headed across Florida. And the one that was the greatest was in I believe it was 1937, maybe 1934, 1937, I believe, that had sustained winds of 185 miles per hour. There was another storm that clocked in at, I believe it was Hurricane Michael. It clocked in at 165 miles an hour. And then there's Charlie and Ian that came across the Florida Peninsula at 150 miles an hour. Arguably, and this is way too small a data set to offer, but obviously, or in this particular thing, the number of power, the amount of power in these storms is trending downward. Also, by the way, I have to point out that indeed what is also happening here is that you see an awful lot of debris, you see an awful lot of broken trees and so on and so forth, like that cypress tree laying over on its side. I mean, that is a serious tree, just upended. The palm trees, more easily understood because they really just have a root ball, but a cypress tree puts down roots and just got tossed aside like it was nothing. But the thing about it is what you have to keep in mind, and you saw Jake Tapper say, hey, when that wind came down that street and started pushing that reporter around, he made an excellent call and said, hey, you know what? You need to get someplace safe. And they do. This is the Wells Report. John David Wells bringing you the news, analysis, commentary, and debate. Stick around. We'll be back with more as we cover Hurricane Ian. I keep trying to call him Ivan. We're covering Hurricane Ian and other things too. There are indeed other stories today, and we're touching on them, and we will continue to do so as we continue on the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. If you know somebody that is currently either fighting with Hurricane Ian or in the path of Hurricane Ian, please ask them to call 817-379-2172. So we were watching live coverage from CNN. We thank them very much for allowing us to dip into their coverage. We were watching CNN, and the reporter standing in the eye of the hurricane, now crossing Bradenton, Florida, was talking about how these storms are becoming more intense as time goes by. Well, actual data appears to not bear that out, certainly when it comes to storms crossing the Florida Peninsula. If anything, they're getting weaker as time has gone by. But what strikes me is how CNN in particular, there are other networks that do it, but how CNN just takes it as a granted thing, just takes it for granted that everybody believes that global warming is creating, first of all, they believe in climate change or global warming. That's thing number one. And then thing number two, that is making these storms more potent and more intense, which is something that an AccuWeather meteorologist was able to disabuse with regards to Don Lemon on CNN the other day. Listen carefully to this.
You want to talk about climate change, but what effect does climate change have on this phenomenon that is happening now? Because it seems these storms are intensifying. That's the question.
I don't think you can link climate change to any one event.
Okay.
On the whole, on the cumulative, climate change may be making storms worse, but to link it to any one event, I would caution against that.
Okay. Well, listen, I grew up there, and these storms are intensifying. Something is causing them to intensify.
Yeah, I've spent time there too. And once again, he spent time there and watching the storms intensify. I'm not exactly sure that he's on solid ground there. This, of course, Don Lemon. And Don is somebody who has no real problem whatsoever, essentially substituting his opinion for news. He was shut down by the acting director of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's National Hurricane Center. It wasn't AccuWeather, after all. After he was asked about the effect of climate change on Hurricane Ian. Jamie Rome joined CNN's John Lemon tonight to talk about Hurricane Ian, which is nearing the Florida coast. This obviously from last night. Lemon noted that meteorologists have said that Hurricane Ian could enter, quote, another period of rapid intensification, and asked Rome what the effect climate change had on the phenomenon. And that was a quote. He then came back. We can come back and talk about climate change at a later time. I want to focus on the here and now. We think the rapid intensification is probably almost done. There could be a little more intensification as it's still over the warm waters of the eastern Gulf of Mexico. But I don't think we're going to get any more rapid intensification. They were talking about what was happening last night. This was a conversation from last night. What they were talking about is that just as Hurricane Ian hit Florida, the storm was indeed intensifying. It was a Category 3 as it crossed Cuba. And then when it got back into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, it rapidly got much more intense. That's what happens when a storm gets over warm, humid air. And that is exactly what's on the eastern coast of Florida, and that fed that hurricane. Now it's going to de-intensify. It's going to weaken as the day goes on today, but as soon as it gets back into the Atlantic, probably crossing through northern Florida and southern Georgia, and maybe the most southern tip of South Carolina, it will indeed re-intensify as it heads out into the open Atlantic. You are listening to the Wells Report. Hurricane Ian on the tip of everyone's mind today. As we bring you that coverage, we want to thank CNN again for their coverage while we dipped in so that we could see what the very latest was from the hurricane-ravaged area of middle to central Florida, southern to central Florida. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thank you very much for joining us today. We are covering Hurricane Ian, and Hurricane Ian is really mangling Florida right now. We are monitoring what's going on. If anything happens that requires your immediate attention, I swear it will have our immediate attention first, and we'll bring it to you. We want to thank you very much for being with the Wells Report. We bring you honest news. We analyze the news for fact and bias, which, by the way, is something that makes it honest news. We de-propagandize American news here. Yeah, it's kind of risky because you just got to do a lot of homework behind the scenes to be able to know what's missing. You see, propaganda is the art of omission. And what you do is you report the facts that serve your political initiative and you drop the ones that don't. And that's propaganda. And that's what we deal with on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, we just showed some on CNN. And fortunately, they were corrected either by me or by a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration meteorologist. And so these are the things that we deal with on this broadcast. News, analysis for fact and bias. We point out both. Then there's commentary. That's just me. That's my opinion. And your opinion, by the way. That leads to debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. If you'd like to support this broadcast, please pass it along to your friends. Pass it along to your friends. Ask them to pass it to their friends. If this show is going to make it, it's going to be because you take an interest in it. And I certainly hope you do. Please do subscribe. Subscribe to the broadcast. And ask your friends to do the same thing. And if you'd like to, oh, by the way, just speaking of like, hit the like button. That helps us out. And so if you'd like to also support the show financially, go to patreon.com/The Wells Report. patreon.com/The Wells Report. We would certainly appreciate anything you could share with us. Thank you. It's like a buck. It's $1 a month. It's not much, but it'll help. I certainly hope you can see your way clear to give us a hand. This broadcast has a set of editorial policies that have served us well in the 21 years we've been doing it since 9/11/2001. And those editorial policies have kept us from misreporting the news that was reported as gospel by a lot of different news organizations. We've been able to avoid really screwing that up, like CNN did and the New York Times did and Washington Post and gosh knows how many other places. They've been sued. But fortunately, even the InfoWars, Alex Jones, Alex Jones is fighting for his financial life right now. Because once again, when you start musing on the air, people can take you seriously. What we do is we provide news gathering, and we report it honestly, and we tear away the garbage. If you do that, I think you'll be okay. People have noticed that Fox News has been sued, but we haven't been, and we aren't going to be, because we're not interested in telling people what is. We're simply reporting the news. I'm not going to take my particular flights of fantasy and turn them into news. That's why I'm so careful about differentiating between my opinion and news. The reason I'm saying all this is because there's a news story that we did not ignore, but we also did not report. And that had to do with the QAnon conspiracy. If you don't happen to know what QAnon is, according to Wikipedia, it is an American political theory and movement originating in the American far right in 2017. QAnon centers on claims made by anonymous individuals or individuals known as the Q. Those claims have been relayed, developed, supplemented by numerous communities and influencers associated with the movement. The core QAnon theory is that a cabal of sexual abusers of children is operating a global child sex trafficking ring and conspired against former U.S. President Donald Trump during his term in office. QAnon has direct roots in something called Pizzagate. That's an internet conspiracy theory that appeared 1 year earlier. It also incorporates some of the elements of a lot of other theories. By the way, in case you forgot, Pizzagate is a conspiracy theory that went viral during the 2016 United States presidential cycle. It's been extensively discredited by a wide range of organizations, including the Washington, D.C. police. By the way, in case you're wondering what that is, in March of 2016, the personal email account of John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign chair, was hacked in a spear phishing attack. WikiLeaks published the emails in November of 2016. Proponents of the Pizzagate conspiracy claim the emails contained coded messages that connected several high-ranking Democrat Party officials and U.S. restaurants with an alleged human trafficking and child sex ring. This, of course, enveloped Jeffrey Epstein, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We didn't report on it. And the reason we didn't report on it was because I'm still waiting for news. Now, we don't just report the ramblings, the one-sided ramblings of lynch mobs. We just don't do that. That's why we also didn't spend a lot of time covering the January 6th committee. As it turns out, according to books, there are people within the January 6th committee and certainly within the Democrat Party that are also pointing out that there is no due process for President Trump in both in the impeachments and in the January 6th committee. Like I said, we don't cover the ravings of lynch mobs. Now, there is news regarding all of this. I'm going to put it together here. At a rally in Youngstown, Ohio this month for GOP Senate candidate J.D. Vance, dozens of supporters of Donald Trump held up an index finger in salute as the former president spoke. Music played in the background called a song called WWG1WGA, an abbreviation for Where We Go One, We Go All, the slogan for the QAnon conspiracy theory. Then this morphs into this one hand gesture, morphs into, in this USA Today article, as the following. Former President Donald Trump's embrace of QAnon, including resharing QAnon conspiracy accounts to his millions of social media followers, risks eroding trust in the American democracy and potentially fostering violence. On August 30th, President Trump shared a post on his Truth Social platform from the QAnon account of Patriotic American Alpha Sauce, falsely declaring that Trump won the 2020 election. The former president added also falsely, FBI has advanced this fact even further. That is untrue, and this is out of nowhere. That is untrue. Joe Biden legally won the presidency. So once again, this is the bias that we point out. Okay, I'm not saying that Joe Biden didn't win the election. I'm just saying that this is a biased article. Then they continue with Trump's promotion of QAnon is reinvigorating a conspiracy movement that metamorphosized into election denialism over the past 2 years. His boosting of that kind of misinformation could help lead to problems from election-denying candidates winning office up to violence in the November midterms. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, you're saying, now, wait a minute, John David. Okay, so you just spent 5 minutes talking about how you don't cover QAnon. Why are you doing it now? Well, technically, I'm not covering QAnon. I'm not covering President Trump and the biased association of President Trump with QAnon that is portrayed in this article by USA Today. What I'm interested in is this. This paragraph. Former President Donald Trump's embrace of QAnon, including resharing QAnon conspiracy accounts to his millions of social media followers, risks eroding trust in American democracy and potentially fostering violence. I am here to say that is exactly what President Biden was doing when he characterized the voters of President Donald Trump, the MAGA mob, as he referred to them as, That is exactly what President Biden was doing, eroding trust in American democracy and potentially fostering violence. In fact, violence has actually occurred against people of right-wing persuasion. We've already covered the right-wing, persecution is the wrong word. Shall we say the over-enforcement of law against right-wing figures around the country by the FBI, the DOJ, etc. And what I am doing is I am saying, and I thought of this and I'm going, does this mean that President Trump is actually going to give oxygen to the QAnon conspiracy accounts? The other thing that crossed my mind, by the way, was, okay, so are some of these classified documents that were taken in the Mar-a-Lago papers, do those deal with QAnon? That could be something that would fit into a category that I surmised a while back, that maybe some of these classified documents were actually articles of evidence for some court circumstances to come up later. And it, by the way, does explain why, if there is indeed a deep state conspiracy like we've been discussing, this would be another step in doing their best to rid any kind of evidence from what might be an open source in the future. Now, once again, there are an awful lot of ifs and buts in there, and I always point out ifs and buts, no matter who is ifing and butting. But what I want to tell you is this. This is the point of all of this. Let's assume, for whatever example, that President Trump brings up QAnon because it makes Democrat blood run cold. And yes, it could erode confidence in the democracy, even though this is a republic. It can erode the democracy. But isn't that what President Trump is doing? With MAGA Republicans? Vilifying 74 million Americans? And there have been pieces of violence. I'm going to report on one here in just a couple of seconds. But I find it fascinating that, to me, this seems to be obvious. All of the things that they are saying could be happening based on Donald Trump's embracement, as they call it, of QAnon conspiracy theory is actually happening under very similar circumstances, with President Biden decrying the idea that MAGA Republicans were indeed domestic terrorists. Now, remember, this is the same group of people that have been called neo-Nazis. They've been called bigots, racists, anything-ophobic. They've been besmirched and stomped on for years at this point. And maybe what Donald Trump is doing is pointing out that there are other things that are equally damaging to, say, for example, QAnon Democrats, MAGA Republicans, QAnon Democrats. Just how many bombs do you want to throw back and forth? I find it fascinating that there is so little information coming out of the Epstein child sex trafficking ring, which was indeed occurring. Lolita Island, or it was the Lolita Express, going to a private island owned by Jeffrey Epstein. Prince Andrew, one of the people that visited there, all but disowned by the royal family. So why is there such little information coming out about that? And were those classified documents, did some of them deal with that? Once again, all I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to put these things together in a way that create a balance between this idea of QAnon, the conspiracy that there are people that are doing dreadful things, with MAGA Republicans being described as people doing dreadful things by the President of the United States, Joe Biden. And yes, there has been violence. In fact, a Michigan man has talked a little bit about, well, a recent accident. Who did that involve? Why did that all happen? We'll report that next. You're listening to the Wells Report. This is Wednesday. Back in a second. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. So there was an incident the other day that I think you should hear about. It happened in Michigan. A Michigan man says he shot an elderly pro-life volunteer last week. He's spoken out about the incident, saying that it was an accident following the volunteer allegedly getting into a heated back and forth over abortion. I came out and she, the unidentified pro-life volunteer, is screaming and having a great old time and being told at least a dozen times, "You're trespassing, get off the property," according to 74-year-old Richard Harvey, telling News 8. An unidentified 83-year-old woman was canvassing the neighborhood near Lake Odessa in Ionia County on September 20th for Right to Life of Michigan to discuss the state's vote on the proposal called Proposal 3. It's an upcoming ballot measure that would protect abortion access across the state. The Right to Life of Michigan first sounded the alarm on the shooting over the weekend, saying in a press release that the victim said that she was shot in the back or shoulder, leaving her residence during a heated conversation. The man who shot her was not a part of the conversation. The unidentified pro-life canvasser was able to drive herself to a local police station, despite being dazed by the shooting, fearing she would be shot again. This according to a Right to Life of Michigan press release. She's now recovering. Harvey and his wife, Sharon Harvey, spoke to the media for the first time on Tuesday, said the shooting was an accident, arguing the pro-life canvasser had gotten into a screaming match with Sharon Harvey over abortion. Sharon Harvey recounted that she heard a knock on the door September 20th, was greeted by a woman who was from some coalition to save women and babies. She needed me to vote no on Proposal 3, said Sharon Harvey. She told pro-life volunteers that she would not oppose Proposal 3 as she had a 4.5-month tubal pregnancy in 1971 required surgery that nearly killed her. She would not take the fact that I was going to vote yes on Proposal 3 as an answer. She didn't care. She didn't care. I told her, women are going to die. I nearly died, she says. Well, you didn't, did you? That was the reply from the pro-life activist. Sharon Harvey said she told the pro-life volunteer to leave her property at least a dozen times before the canvasser stepped off the front porch. Meanwhile, Richard Harvey was in the barn in the backyard when he heard screaming from the house. He grabbed his wife's .22 caliber rifle and fired a warning shot. You don't fire warning shots. That's against the law. She, the volunteer, was still ranting and raving. She's got this clipboard. She's waving it around. I'm thinking she's going to smack Sharon with it. So without thinking, I went to club it away with the rifle. My finger was still on the trigger guard. It went off and hit her about in here, pointing to his right shoulder. He then called 911, I'm assuming. I shot somebody. It was an accident. It's always possible he will be charged. The Right to Life from Michigan added, no one should fear violence while peacefully exercising their constitutionally protected right to free speech. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about the other realities of this. What would have happened if that had been a pro-abortion activist that got into a heated shouting match in front of, say, for example, a pro-life household? So if that indeed is the case, what would have happened next? What would have happened next? You tell me. 817-379-2172. Now, the most important thing that you have to remember is that certainly when you're in a position where you are trying to defend your property, and that is apparently what the case was. When you're in that situation, there are certain responsibilities that you have to abide by. And those people, and I'm looking them up right now. I probably should have done this before we did this. So the St. Louis couple, remember, Mark and Patricia McCloskey, they walked out in their front yard to defend their property. And they didn't shoot anybody. By the way, it's a miracle they didn't shoot each other. Their ability to handle weapons was so terrible, I shuddered to think. I mean, it was just, they had no idea that the chances that they were going to shoot each other were far greater than they would ever talk about when talking about honest protesters that were walking down a private street on private property, threatening that private property and the people who owned it. So what I'm trying to figure out is, all right, so those were BLM protesters. Now, this protester that was on the property of someone else who just got shot. How much trouble will that couple get into? I'm betting it's going to be less. Of course, it's kind of apples and oranges. The difference is Missouri and Michigan. But you do get my point, correct? Once again, these people that have, say, for example, decried abortion clinics, etc., they get one set of handling, but those people who actually vandalize pro-life organizations do not. And now somebody gets shot. This is the Wells Report. Back again tomorrow. Thanks very much for joining this broadcast. Until then, be safe, make good decisions, and thanks for watching. All right, wonderfuls. Thank you so much. I do appreciate it.